Hello and welcome to KCG's Broadband Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about all the new and exciting innovations in broadband. I'm here with Sarah.
Hey, Duncan.
And she's going to be teaching you and I about broadband.
Yeah, that's right. So what we've seen recently is that there's been a lot of changes happening right now within the Commonwealth of Virginia and in the sector of broadband. So basically, starting off, just asking the question of what is broadband? The original definition of broadband was any internet connectivity that didn't happen through dial-up. So basically, any other way that people could connect to the internet that wasn't dial-up, that was defined as broadband. But as broadband has really come to shape the world we live in, the FCC has actually kind of changed and honed in the definition, and now it's basically defined as high-speed internet that is always on, or there's always a connection that's happening, and it's fast. And there are a couple of different kinds of broadband that the FCC has outlined. One is digital subscription lines, there's cable modems, fiber, wireless, satellite, and then there's also BPL, which is broadband over power lines is what that stands for. And those are just the different ways that broadband can take form and can be utilized by different cities or businesses. And that's really what we've seen recently is that businesses and cities and really states in general have been moving towards developing sophisticated broadband infrastructure because they've realized the impact that broadband has on the healthcare sector, on the economy, on the political sector, and just on the everyday lives of the citizens that are in their localities and how it shapes those kinds of things.
So Sarah, we know money makes the world go round. Why financially would we consider broadband?
Yeah, that's a great question, Duncan. And there are a couple of different reasons. And the cool thing about broadband is that because different areas have developed sophisticated broadband infrastructure much faster than other areas, we see that there's this dichotomy between rural areas who don't have very developed infrastructure for broadband and larger cities like Virginia Beach or Chesapeake that do have slightly better broadband infrastructures. And we're able to compare and see really what the impact is on those two different areas. So for financial impacts, we've seen that the cost on public services is greatly impacted. And this basically means emergency services, things that are, so the police force, the fire department, different hospital lines, those kinds of things have been able to financially increase their bottom line through having better connection that reduces time, reduces response time, and creates a connection between those kinds of services. It also connects these larger cities with more rural areas, so we see a better level of care that happens in the world of emergency services with broadband. The next thing is that it actually brings businesses to areas. So when an area has high-speed broadband and has developed quality infrastructure for that broadband, it helps the daily lives of their consumers, but also businesses look at the quality of the broadband of the area that they're moving into. So when a business is deciding, okay, do we go to Norfolk or do we go to somewhere up in New York, if the broadband infrastructure is more developed in Norfolk, then they're definitely going to have an incentive to come down here because it's going to be more cost effective for their business to thrive. And really that's going to increase the whole economy of Virginia if we're bringing businesses in, especially to rural areas because they're developing quality broadband.
So you've talked a little bit about the financial influence of broadband. Can you tell us how it might impact the political sphere?
Yeah, and there's been a lot of change right now that's been happening in the political sphere, specifically within the Commonwealth of Virginia, and that's really why we're kind of talking about broadband today. Localities should be aware of what broadband is. That hasn't always been a necessity in the past, but now the General Assembly of Virginia actually amended the state code, and they made changes which basically demand and mandate that each locality sets a floor or a minimum of broadband infrastructure. So the specific wording of the plan is that these localities have to each develop a plan for broadband infrastructure that takes into account strategies for next generation broadband. So this means that these localities have to start thinking about not only the impact that broadband has on their sort of as-is infrastructure, but also what it could look like in the future and really moving forward with that plan.
So what is KCG's role in all of this, Sarah?
Well, first off, KCG has a lot of experience consulting and coming and standing along with different localities, municipalities, and businesses who are working on broadband development and sort of internet connectivity infrastructure. So KCG can be an ally within this process that is going to have a lot of changes. We're not really sure what's on the landscape and what this is going to look like. And the bottom line is that these municipalities, they have to have this plan put in place before, the deadline. So if they're over their heads and they don't really know what broadband is and they don't know what it means for their specific locality, KCG is here to come alongside those different localities and work with them to develop that plan and develop a plan that not only meets basically the bottom line of what this code now mandates KCG and these localities sort of has developed, but also a plan that's going to allow their locality to prosper and to utilize broadband to its best abilities.
Can you tell us what utilizing broadband would mean in the spheres of healthcare and education?
Yeah, absolutely. So with healthcare infrastructure, the main impact that we'll see is telehealth. And there's been some back and forth as to whether or not telehealth is a good thing and whether it's accessible or safe. But what we've seen develop over the last couple of years is that telehealth really gives rural areas access to doctors, hospitals, and most importantly, specialists who can give the citizens living in these rural areas the care that they not only need but also deserve. Secondly, broadband has an impact on data sharing within the healthcare sector. So it allows hospitals in rural areas or just areas that are farther away, so within different states, to connect and share data from patients and allow them the ability to get really crucial medical information from one hospital that is all the way across the country to another hospital. And that has a significant impact on the ability to diagnose a patient and for that patient to be able to live or not. To answer the second portion of your question, the education sector is also really benefits from having developed broadband infrastructure. The first area we see an impact on is informed citizenry. So broadband allows better connection to things like the news, and it also gives people the opportunity to pursue outlooks like online education. So that can really influence the vocational abilities that somebody living in a more rural area has to develop their own skill sets and work within a specific industry that they might not be able to have access to training for within their area. High school and middle school educations also have a significant impact with broadband. So we see that over 60% of homework now for middle school and high school students is done primarily online. And if the program or the homework isn't based online, they need online resources to be able to complete their homework. And we're even seeing this in as early as childhood education with kindergarten and preschool, the necessity of online resources for education. So rural areas that are experiencing an information gap and don't have access to the kind of information that people with high-speed broadband have, they're getting left behind. And that's really something that developing next-generation broadband infrastructure can solve.
Thank you for sharing all that information, Sarah. I'm sure most of us didn't know that there were so many changes going on in the broadband universe. If you believe the broadband in your area is underdeveloped, please feel free to reach out to Team KCG and our experts like Sarah for more information about broadband and how you can expand your broadband knowledge. We look forward to working with you and creating the future together.